EA may have ruined a potentially great Star Wars game, but the upside is that their royal fuck-up has also inadvertently caused a ripple effect that may push the industry towards a better future. It's truly poetic that EA, the game publisher that has benefited the most from predatory loot boxes, were the spark that will light the fire that may burn loot boxes down. But hey, that's what happens when you get cocky and overreach. This was EA at the height of their hubris, getting what was coming to them. From their gross error of judgment, we are already seeing government officials mobilizing in full force. Just a few days ago, I talked about how representatives and senators from 5 other US states have joined Hawaii Representative Chris Lee in the fight against loot boxes. Their goal is to strong-arm the gaming industry into regulating themselves by introducing a fair bill that will restrict any games with loot boxes for minors under the age of 21, by taking enough of a potential market share from game publishers to make it a financial liability to include loot boxes. The hope is that it will force them to take a step back and actually focus on the quality of their games to make money, not on malicious manipulation. Now, the threat of government intervention certainly goes a long way, but it's equally important that organizations within the private sector show a similar resolve. The more the stigmatization of loot boxes can spread across the industry, the better, which is why Apple's recently updated policies for App Store developers is such a pivotal development. The following information comes from Apple's official developer website. If you scroll down to the payment section of the guidelines, you will notice one particular excerpt that directly references loot boxes or other similar mechanics. The statement reads, "Apps offering loot boxes or other mechanisms that provide randomized virtual items for purchase must disclose the odds of receiving each type of item to customers prior to purchase." This right here has huge ramifications. Apple's App Store is host to some of the most popular RNG-based mobile games in the world, with its only real competing platform being the Google Play Store. Apple has a huge share of the mobile games market, so them making these changes is a substantial step in the right direction. It is no secret that many of the predatory pay-to-win practices that are seeping into our premium AAA games stemmed from mobile games. So by rooting out and scrutinizing the source of exploitative loot boxes, it could potentially set a precedent for the rest of the gaming industry as a whole. Now, the jury's still out on whether Apple will actually go out of their way to enforce these regulations. I still question whether Apple's intention with all of this was to do the right thing for a better tomorrow, whether they're doing this for good PR or whether this is their attempt to keep potential ire from the gaming community, the media, and government officials off their backs. But regardless of intention, regardless of whether Apple is making a stand or running scared, the important thing is that change is happening at an alarming rate for greedy publishers, and it's all in no small part thanks to EA's fuck-up and the resounding outcry from protesting gamers. As for whether we will see game developers and publishers for the App Store back off from loot boxes that easily after this, I highly doubt that they'll go down without a fight. Unfortunately, where loot boxes fit within legal confines is still very hazy in our modern day and age. The law has yet to catch up to the rapid maturation of loot boxes. That's why we've seen so many government officials from other countries express that despite their deep concern for loot boxes, they can't define them as legally gambling quite yet until new legislations or legislative changes are introduced. The current blurry definition of loot boxes is no doubt a tool that game publishers intend to exploit to find loopholes for the feature's unhampered implementation. Case in point, remember how earlier this year, China enforced a new law that forced games with RNG rewards like Dota, League of Legends, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch, and Counter-Strike to disclose the odds of getting desired loot. Well, guess how games like Overwatch have gone out of their way to circumvent these laws. Instead of making it so players can purchase loot boxes directly, they implemented purchasable premium currency that awarded free loot boxes, with a premium currency allowing players to buy cosmetics like skins, sprays, so on and so forth. So all they had to do was make loot boxes indirect purchases by adding a second layer to the process and by advertising them as free gifts. And keep in mind that these changes made to Overwatch were only applied for China and nowhere else. The fact that Blizzard is going so far out of their way to not disclose the odds of their loot box system should just about tell you that they most certainly have something to hide. Anyway, you get the idea. The point is that even with Apple's updated policies, there is still the potential for App Store developers to find workarounds to circumvent the currently vague, basic, one-sentence-long loot box regulations. We'll have to wait to find out how all of this plays out, though. At the end of the day, Apple is in full control over their own ecosystem, so we could potentially see them cracking down hard on the most predatory games. And if not, even if Apple's new regulation turns out to be more bark and less bite for now, news of Apple taking a step like this still goes a long way in spreading the message, making loot box implementations less financially viable and furthering their stigmatization. Even if not much ends up changing in the short term despite these updated policies, the message this sends is bound to make waves across the industry that could pave the road to positive long-term results. Now, do I think that Apple took these regulations far enough? Do I think we should have the gaming industry disclose the odds of loot boxes and call it a day? Hell no. I still think that the best long-term solution is to enforce an age restriction for these glorified slot machines. What is gambling should be treated as gambling. Ideally, I'd like for the ESRB to step in and actually enforce their own stipulations that games featuring gambling with real currency should be restricted for adults only. But alas, I think we're still a long ways off before we reach that point. As long as game publishers with vast sums of money like EA continue lobbying the ESRB's parent organization, the ESA, or until they finally come to their senses before the government kicks down the door, they are bound to keep denying that loot boxes are a form of gambling. One step at a time though. To Apple's credit, they did take that initial step towards self-regulation, an example that the ESA, the ESRB, and major game publishers have yet to follow. Unlike the rest of the gaming industry, Apple seems to see beyond just their noses, and they seem to understand that there's a political storm brewing on the horizon on this issue, and they are at least making some form of reaction beyond outright denial. You know, 2018 should be an interesting year. I'm curious to see whether the gaming industry changes course after a tumultuous 2017 in the premium-priced AAA landscape, or if they will remain stubborn. But hey, at the very least, legislators like Chris Lee and Apple's updated policies closed off the year with a semblance of hope for a positive change moving forward. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this video informative, and if you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon to help this channel stay independent and self-sustained. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.